I don't know. I feel like I always play my best tennis when I'm in
It's
a...
mind games, okay? Yeah, but when I'm going to the line, ready to serve, they don't need to cheer.
It's never a good feeling to finish a match like that. I hope everything's okay with her because, it was a really tough battle.
Because it's been proven true time and time again. Yet somehow, on a quiet afternoon in Beijing, Belinda Bencic decided to throw that rulebook straight into the trash can and set it on fire. Picture this scene, if you will. You're up a full set against one of the most dangerous young champions in tennis history. You're serving with confidence, controlling the rhythm of the match, and victory is so close you can practically taste the champagne. The momentum belongs to you, the experience is on your side, and all the tactical advantages are stacked in your favor. In that moment, what's the absolute worst thing you could possibly do? If you answered, accuse your opponent of cheating, berate her team, and claim you're too sophisticated for the mind games you're actively creating, congratulations, you've just unlocked the Belinda Bencic Beijing breakdown strategy, patent pending. What transpired over the next 90 minutes wasn't merely a tennis match slipping through someone's fingers like sand on a windy beach. This was a complete and utter psychological collapse, a masterclass in self-sabotage that will be studied in sports psychology textbooks for years to come. This was the textbook definition of instant regret served up with a side of humiliation and garnished with a smashed racket for good measure. The tennis gods don't just punish hubris, they absolutely demolish it. And Belinda Bencic learned that lesson the hardest way possible while the entire tennis world watched with a mixture of shock and secondhand embarrassment. Welcome to the absolute chaos that unfolded at the China Open, where drama reached levels that would make reality television producers jealous, where a verbal confrontation turned into a competitive massacre, and where Coco Gauff reminded everyone exactly why she's not just a champion on the court, but increasingly the undisputed queen of the entire tennis business empire. We're diving deep into the meltdown that broke the internet, the comeback that silenced the critics, the strategic partnerships that came from sliding into Instagram DMs, and the absolutely massive financial numbers that prove Gauff isn't just winning matches, she's winning at life itself. Get comfortable, because this story has more layers than a championship point rally, and every single one of them is absolutely wild. Let's transport ourselves to the scene of this sporting crime. Beijing, China, September 29, 2025, under the bright lights and surprisingly empty stands of the China Open. On one baseline stands Coco Gauff, the reigning champion of this tournament, the third-ranked player in the world, and the undeniable face of American tennis for the foreseeable future. Across the net, Belinda Bencic, the Olympic gold medalist who captured hearts worldwide with her inspiring return to professional tennis after taking time away to start a family. On paper, in the preview articles, in the pre-match analysis, this was supposed to be a respectful, competitive battle between two accomplished professionals who had nothing but admiration for each other's games. For approximately 60 minutes, that's exactly what tennis fans were treated to. Bencic emerged from the tunnel looking absolutely dialed in, striking the ball with precision and purpose that suggested all those months away from competition hadn't dulled her instincts one bit. She was painting lines like Picasso, moving around the court with surprising fluidity, and capitalizing ruthlessly on an unusually shaky start from the defending champion. Gauff looked uncomfortable from the opening game, her usually reliable serve abandoning her at the worst possible time, double faults creeping into her game like unwanted house guests, and visible frustration etched across her face with every unforced error. Bencic seized the opportunity with both hands, closing out the first set with a convincing 6-4 scoreline. The Olympic champion had the American superstar on the ropes, wobbling, vulnerable, and looking for answers she wasn't finding. Then the second set began, and the entire atmosphere transformed from competitive tennis into something that felt more like a psychological thriller where everyone could see the disaster coming except the person walking straight toward it. To fully understand what happened next, we need to appreciate the unique environment these two warriors were competing in, because the setting itself became a central character in this drama. The stadium was practically deserted, one of those early round matches scheduled at an awkward time when most fans are still at work or haven't yet made their way to the tennis complex. The emptiness created an acoustic environment where every sound was amplified, where you could hear the squeak of sneakers pivoting on hardcourt, where conversations echoed, and most importantly for our story, where every single word from the player boxes carried across the court like someone had installed surround sound speakers. At 2-3 in the second set, with Bencic still firmly in control of the match, still holding all the cards, still in the driver's seat heading toward what should have been a routine victory, something shifted in the tennis cosmos. Gauff, displaying the kind of defensive skills that have become her trademark, chased down what looked like a perfectly executed drop shot from Bencic and somehow flicked a winner past the surprised Swiss player. From Coco's box, a cheer erupted, the kind of spontaneous celebration that happens when your player pulls off something spectacular and seemingly impossible. That cheer, that singular moment of support and excitement, appeared to flip a switch inside Belinda Bencic's mind, and not the good kind of switch that athletes talk about when they elevate their game to another level. This was the switch that turns rational thinking into paranoid conspiracy theory, competitive fire into destructive rage, and tactical advantage into strategic disaster. Maybe the pressure of being so close to a massive upset victory finally cracked through her composure. Maybe the heat and humidity of Beijing got to her. Maybe she genuinely believed something unfair was happening. Or maybe she just catastrophically misread the entire situation. But whatever the reason, Bencic completely lost her composure in spectacular fashion. She started gesturing wildly toward Coco's team box, her arms flailing in exaggerated motions that looked more suited to directing air traffic than playing professional tennis. She was furious, absolutely livid, her face flushed with anger that seemed way out of proportion to anything that had actually occurred on the court. She marched directly to the chair umpire with the kind of determined stride usually reserved for lawyers approaching the bench during a contentious trial, and she unleashed a verbal tirade that the court microphones picked up with crystal clarity, broadcasting her complaints to anyone watching around the world. Her accusation was clear and damning. Gauff's team was deliberately cheering during her service motion, disrupting her concentration, engaging in gamesmanship that she compared to the behavior of under-12 tennis players who don't know proper tennis etiquette. But here's where the situation escalated from uncomfortable to absolutely cringeworthy, where Bencic made the fatal mistake that would transform this from a forgettable complaint to a viral moment that would define the match. She didn't stop at the umpire. She turned her fury directly toward the 21-year-old American champion standing across the net from her. In one of the most awkward and heated player-to-player exchanges of the entire tennis season, Bencic snapped at Gauff with barely contained rage. She told her dismissively, "No one's talking to you. She's talking to me. I haven't started. Your team is chanting." As if Gauff was some kind of junior player who needed to be put in her place rather than a Grand Slam champion and the third-ranked player in the world. And then, in the moment that would launch 1,000 memes and Twitter debates, Bencic looked directly into Coco Gauff's eyes and delivered the line that instantly became the most talked-about quote of the tournament. "I am too old for these mind games, okay?" The irony was so thick you could cut it with a tennis racket. Here was a 28-year-old veteran telling a 21-year-old that she was too old for mind games, while simultaneously having an absolute meltdown in the middle of a tennis match that she was winning. If anyone was engaging in psychological warfare at that moment, it was Bencic waging it against herself, shooting her own mental game in the foot while complaining about snipers in the stands. Gauff, displaying the kind of composure that belies her young age, looked genuinely baffled by the entire confrontation. She tried to explain calmly and rationally that the stadium was so silent that naturally you could hear both teams supporting their players, that there was nothing unusual or unsportsmanlike happening, that this was just standard tennis behavior in an unusually quiet environment. But Bencic wasn't interested in reasonable explanations or logical arguments. She was convinced, absolutely certain in her mind, that some kind of conspiracy was unfolding to disrupt her rhythm and steal her victory, that mind games were being deployed against her like psychological weapons. And for a brief, terrifying moment that had Gauff fans around the world clutching their phones and holding their breath, it looked like maybe, just maybe, Bencic's bizarre tactic had actually worked. Gauff admitted candidly in her post-match press conference that she was genuinely rattled by the confrontation, thrown off her game by the unexpected accusation and the sudden toxic atmosphere that had infected what should have been a straightforward professional tennis match. In the very next game after the confrontation, visible nerves and frustration manifested in Coco's game as she threw in 3 consecutive double faults, the kind of service breakdown that can derail an entire match. She was frustrated, she was second-guessing herself, and the psychological poison that Bencic had injected into the match had clearly seeped onto Coco's side of the net. Bencic promptly broke serve and surged ahead to a 4-3 lead in the second set. She was now just 2 games away from one of the biggest upset victories of her comeback season. 2 games from knocking out the defending champion and making a massive statement to the tennis world. But this is precisely the moment where true champions reveal themselves, where the difference between good players and great ones becomes crystal clear, where character and mental fortitude matter more than any technical stroke or tactical game plan. Instead of crumbling under the pressure and the negativity, instead of letting the disrespect and accusations destroy her confidence, Coco Gauff got angry, properly angry, the productive kind of anger that doesn't express itself through smashed rackets or shouted complaints, but rather through elevated performance and steely determination. This wasn't the destructive rage that we would see from Bencic shortly, but rather the cold, focused fury of a competitor who has been disrespected and has decided that the best response is to utterly dominate. Gauff revealed later that at that exact moment, with her back against the wall and doubts creeping in, she made a conscious decision, a commitment to herself that changed everything. She told herself firmly, "Okay, I don't want to lose anymore after this point." It was a mental line in the sand, a declaration that whatever happened from that moment forward would be on her terms, that she was done being rattled, done being passive, done letting someone else control the emotional narrative of the match. She decided to transform Bencic's disrespect into fuel for her competitive fire. Rennie Stubbs, the former doubles world #1 who has forgotten more about tennis psychology than most people will ever know, analyzed this turning point with the kind of clarity that comes from decades of experience competing at the highest levels. She said something that should be carved into stone at every tennis academy in the world. If you're winning a match, you just gotta go and play. You do not want to add fuel to somebody's fire, particularly someone like Coco. And that's exactly what Bencic had done in her moment of frustration and paranoia. She had taken a burning ember of competitive spirit and thrown gasoline on it, creating an inferno that would consume her chances of victory. Suddenly, dramatically, almost miraculously, Gauff stopped missing. The serve that had been betraying her all match suddenly dialed in with laser precision. The backhand that had been tentative started ripping down the line with authority. The footwork that had looked sluggish in the first set transformed into the kind of court coverage that makes opponents feel like they're hitting into a brick wall. She fought back from the brink, dragging the second set into a tiebreaker that neither player wanted but both desperately needed to win. Meanwhile, Bencic was still mentally stuck in the confrontation, still complaining to the umpire about perceived injustices, still letting the situation live rent-free in her head, while Gauff was busy doing what champions do, winning points, one after another, accumulating them like a collector gathering precious gems. Coco took the tiebreaker with a convincing 7-4 scoreline, and the moment that scoreboard flipped, you could see it in Bencic's body language, in the slump of her shoulders, in the vacant look in her eyes. That was the precise moment her spirit broke, when she realized that her meltdown had cost her the match, when the weight of her own psychological self-destruction crashed down on her like a ton of bricks. In a fit of pure, undiluted rage and frustration, Bencic smashed her racket into the court with such force that it literally exploded into pieces, graphite and strings flying everywhere like shrapnel from a sporting grenade. It was the universal sign recognized in every sport that a competitor knows they've completely blown it, that they have no one to blame but themselves, that the victory that should have been theirs has slipped irretrievably through their fingers. The third set wasn't even competitive. It was a massacre, a public execution of what remained of Bencic's chances and confidence. Gauff ran away with it 6-2, playing with the kind of freedom and aggressive confidence that comes from knowing you've already won the mental battle, and now you're just collecting the physical trophy. From being up a full set and a service break, from being in complete control, to accusing her opponent of cheating, to losing the plot mentally, to smashing her equipment in frustration, to getting thoroughly outplayed in the deciding set, Belinda Bencic experienced the full spectrum of instant regret compressed into about 90 minutes of tennis. The final scoreline read 4-6, 7-6, 6-2, but those numbers don't come close to capturing the psychological journey and complete reversal of fortune that had just unfolded. The handshake at the net was frosty but civil, both players maintaining the bare minimum of professional courtesy, even as the tension crackled in the air between them. However, the real insights and unfiltered thoughts came during the press conference afterward, where Gauff, displaying a maturity and emotional intelligence that seems almost unfair for someone who can't legally rent a car in some countries, dissected the entire situation with surgical precision and remarkable grace. She explained calmly and logically that because the stadium was so respectful and quiet, naturally sounds carried differently, that Bencic was hearing normal celebration amplified by the acoustic environment rather than any deliberate attempt to disrupt her game. Gauff threw just a little bit of shade, enough to make her point without being cruel, saying with a slight smile, "I guess she was upset about them cheering. For me, the stadium is silent, so you hear both teams," pointing out the obvious double standard in Bencic's complaints. But then Gauff delivered what might be the most important line of the entire post-match discussion, a statement that perfectly encapsulated her approach not just to this match, but to her entire career and public persona. She looked directly at the assembled media and said with quiet confidence, "I'm entitled to how I respond." She didn't apologize for her team's support. She didn't back down from her position. She didn't engage in false diplomacy or try to smooth over the controversy with platitudes. She acknowledged that Bencic was a great player and that her return to tennis after becoming a mother was inspiring and commendable, but she absolutely stood her ground on the substance of the dispute. "I obviously wish today didn't happen, but it is what it is," she concluded with a philosophical shrug that suggested she had already moved past the drama while others would be dissecting it for weeks. That's the mindset of a true winner. You don't dwell on the drama or let it consume your thoughts. You acknowledge it exists, you beat it decisively, and you immediately start preparing for the next challenge. And the tennis fans watching this unfold on their screens and devices? The internet absolutely exploded with reactions, hot takes, memes, and commentary that ranged from thoughtful analysis to pure comedic gold. Social media platforms were flooded with videos, screenshots, and passionate opinions, with the overwhelming majority of tennis fans siding firmly with Gauff and absolutely roasting Bencic for her meltdown. One fan wrote with exasperation, "If she didn't complain, she would have won this match. I can't with her," perfectly capturing the self-inflicted nature of Bencic's defeat. Another pointed out the obvious lesson that every sports psychologist would confirm. If you're complaining to the chair umpire, you've already lost the mental battle. The match instantly became a case study in sports psychology, a perfect example of how mental mistakes can be more costly than any technical error, how losing focus on the process of competing and getting caught up in peripheral frustrations can completely derail even the most advantageous position. This victory was absolutely massive for Gauff on multiple levels beyond just the scoreboard. Not only did she definitively shut down the disrespect and the accusations, proving with her racket that actions speak louder than complaints, but she also secured her spot in the prestigious 2025 WTA Finals, guaranteeing herself a seat at the table with the elite 8 players in the world at the season-ending championship. Additionally, she extended her winning streak in Beijing to an impressive 9 consecutive matches, establishing herself as the absolute queen of this particular tournament, the player who owns this court and this city when it comes to professional tennis. While Bencic was left literally picking up the pieces of her smashed racket and figuratively picking up the pieces of her shattered game plan, Gauff was already preparing mentally and physically for her quarterfinal matchup against Eva Liss, proving once again that the best revenge isn't angry words or social media clapbacks. It's simply winning the next match and the one after that, and continuing to stack victories while your critics fade into irrelevance. But the drama and fireworks in Beijing represent just one chapter, one incident, one data point in the much larger story of where Coco Gauff currently stands in her career trajectory. She's positioned at an absolutely pivotal point as the tennis world begins looking ahead toward the 2026 season, with experts, analysts, and fans all asking the same fundamental question that will define the upcoming year. Who is going to dominate women's tennis in 2026? Is it going to be the raw power and intimidating presence of Aryna Sabalenka, Or is it going to be the athleticism, speed, and improving all-around game of Coco Gauff? Tennis Channel analysts have been debating this question intensely, getting into spirited discussions that sometimes border on arguments. And the consensus, if you can call it that, is complicated and nuanced. Victoria Duval, analyzing the situation with her characteristic honesty, thinks Sabalenka has the edge heading into next season primarily because she's more consistent day in and day out. Let's be completely honest and acknowledge the elephant in the room. Gauff's serve can still occasionally take a vacation to destinations unknown, as we witnessed with those 3 brutal consecutive double faults against Bencic that nearly cost her the match. Coco Vandeweghe agrees with this assessment, calling Sabalenka the reliable pick if you're forced to put money on one player to dominate 2026, the safe bet for anyone who values consistency over ceiling. However, David Kane makes an absolutely compelling counterargument for why counting out Coco Gauff would be a huge mistake that the doubters would regret. He points out the fascinating contrast in how these 2 superstars have spent their off-season time, because the way elite athletes prepare when they're not competing often determines who emerges victorious when competition resumes. While Sabalenka has been absolutely everywhere this off-season, playing exhibition matches around the globe, appearing on late-night talk shows, attending celebrity events, doing fashion shoots, and generally living the glamorous life that comes with being one of the sport's biggest stars, Coco Gauff has been notably quiet, almost invisible to the public eye. She hasn't been partying or seeking attention. She's been in the laboratory, putting in work with her biomechanics coach Gavin McMillan, breaking down her service motion frame by frame, rebuilding her technique from the ground up, addressing the weaknesses that cost her matches in 2025. Kane makes the excellent point that one can never count Coco out, even when her serve and forehand become liabilities. Her Roland Garros run is living proof of her ability to overcome technical limitations through sheer competitive will and tactical intelligence. If Gauff can stabilize that serve so it doesn't betray her in crucial moments, if she can keep her forehand from breaking down under the most intense pressure, if she can maintain the mental toughness she displayed in Beijing while adding more weapons to her arsenal, then the sky genuinely is the limit for what she can achieve in her career. Paul Annacone, the legendary coach who guided Pete Sampras and Roger Federer to multiple Grand Slam titles and understands championship mentality better than almost anyone alive, believes that what Gauff needs more than any technical adjustment is a mental reset, a fresh perspective on how she approaches the biggest moments in the biggest matches. And if the Bencic match proved anything beyond a shadow of doubt, it's that Gauff's mental game is rapidly becoming bulletproof, that she's developing the kind of psychological armor that separates good champions from all-time greats. She absorbed the heat of false accusations. She weathered the storm of confrontation. She overcame the rattled nerves that would have sunk lesser players. And she won anyway, decisively and impressively. That kind of resilience and mental fortitude is an incredibly dangerous development for everyone else on tour who has to face her. Speaking of unexpected plot twists and surprising developments, Gauff isn't just making headlines for dramatic on-court feuds and controversial confrontations. She's also generating positive buzz for her willingness to take chances on unexpected partnerships and friendships. In a move that absolutely nobody saw coming, that caught the entire tennis world completely off guard, Gauff revealed a surprising new doubles partnership at the Italian Open earlier this year that perfectly illustrates her approachable personality and willingness to take creative risks. With her usual partner Jessica Pegula unavailable due to fatigue and a packed schedule, Gauff found herself needing a teammate for the doubles draw in Rome. Did she reach out to a veteran player with decades of doubles experience? Did she call one of the top seeds and pitch a partnership based on strategic advantage? No, she did something way more interesting and modern. She checked her Instagram direct messages and found an opportunity waiting there. Alexandra Ila, the 19-year-old rising star from the Philippines who represents the exciting next generation of Asian tennis, had slid into Coco's DMs with an audacious request that most young players wouldn't have the courage to attempt. Do you want to play doubles? Most superstars at Gauff's level would ignore a cold message like that from a relative unknown, dismissing it as presumptuous or unrealistic. But Gauff isn't most superstars. She looked at the message, thought about it for probably all of 30 seconds, and replied with refreshing simplicity, "Sure, why not?" The best part of this story is that they had only met once before in their entire lives, exchanging a quick hi backstage at a tournament in Madrid, basically strangers who knew each other's games only from watching highlights and tournament draws. Yet they stepped onto the red clay in Rome as a team and absolutely dismantled their first-round opponents Panova and Stoller with a dominant 6-3, 6-1 victory that made it look like they'd been playing together for years. The chemistry was immediate and undeniable, born from nothing more than a social media gamble and mutual respect for each other's games. Gauff praised Ila effusively after the match, calling her a killer on the court and pointing to her impressive junior Grand Slam titles as evidence of her championship pedigree and bright future. This entire story perfectly highlights why fans around the world love Coco Gauff beyond just her tennis achievements. She's open to new experiences. She's spontaneous and willing to take chances. She's generous with opportunities for the next generation, even though she herself barely qualifies as a veteran, and she brings a refreshing authenticity to every interaction. It represents a fun and light-hearted pivot from the high-stakes pressure and intensity of singles competition, showing a different side of the fierce competitor we watched destroy Bencic in Beijing. But let's shift our focus to the scoreboard that really makes critics and haters uncomfortable, the numbers that silence doubters more effectively than any on-court performance ever could, the bank account. If you think Gauff's season has been somewhat inconsistent with ups and downs in her results, her financial portfolio is going in exactly one direction, straight up toward the stratosphere. Forbes magazine, the definitive authority on wealth and earnings in the sports world, has just confirmed what many industry insiders already suspected, but seeing it in print still takes your breath away. Coco Gauff is absolutely the undisputed queen of the tennis business world. She has officially entered the stratosphere of earning power previously occupied only by tennis legends like Serena Williams and Naomi Osaka, rarefied air where tennis transcends sport and becomes cultural phenomenon, where athletes transform into global brands that influence fashion, social issues, consumer behavior, and popular culture. She's become a marketing machine, the kind of athlete that companies dream about partnering with. Brands love her because she's authentic and relatable while being extraordinarily talented. Fans absolutely adore her because she handles success and criticism with equal grace, and she possesses that indefinable charisma and presence that allows her to sell anything from pasta to luxury watches and make it seem genuine rather than forced. Even with a slight dip from last year's absolutely absurd $34.4 million, a decrease that came primarily from slightly lower tournament winnings rather than any decline in endorsement appeal, she's still sitting comfortably at the top of the mountain, looking down at everyone else in women's sports with a view that must be absolutely spectacular. Aryna Sabalenka, for all her dominance on court and consistency that analysts love to praise, for all the Grand Slam titles and weeks at number one, is trailing behind Gauff financially at $30 million. Iga Swiatek, the actual world number one in the rankings, the player who has won more tournaments than anyone else recently, is earning $25.1 million. Think about that for a moment and let it really sink in. Coco Gauff is out-earning players who are ranked above her in the official tennis rankings, making more money than women who have arguably had better results on court over the past 12 months. Why does this apparent contradiction exist? Because she has that mysterious it factor that transcends wins and losses, that makes casual sports fans who don't follow tennis closely still know who she is, that makes parents want their daughters to emulate her, that makes marketing executives scramble to sign her before competitors do. She handles controversy like the Bencic incident with remarkable class and maturity that impresses even her critics. She takes creative risks like the Ila partnership with an adventurous style that endears her to fans who appreciate authenticity. And perhaps most importantly, she wins on the biggest stages when the lights burn brightest and the pressure reaches levels that would crush most people, cementing her reputation as someone who delivers when it matters most. So let's take a comprehensive look at the current state of the Coco Gauff empire, this remarkable construction of athletic excellence and business acumen that she's building in real time while most of her former high school classmates are still deciding on college majors. She's winning intense battles against veterans who try to intimidate or bully her, responding with her racket rather than words. She's clinching coveted spots in prestigious year-end championships that ensure maximum exposure and earnings. She's forming exciting new alliances and partnerships via Instagram DMs that show her connection to the next generation. And she's cashing checks that make her literally the wealthiest female athlete on the entire planet, surpassing stars from basketball, soccer, golf, and every other sport. Belinda Bencic might genuinely believe that Coco is playing mind games, but the reality that's becoming increasingly obvious to everyone who pays attention is that Coco is just playing an entirely different game, operating on a completely different level that most players can't even comprehend. She's playing the long game rather than getting caught up in the emotions of any single moment. She's building a legacy that extends far beyond individual matches in empty stadiums in Beijing, creating something that will last decades rather than seasons. Bencic's instant regret moment will become a YouTube clip that gradually fades into obscurity as people move on to the next controversy. But Gauff's response, the mental toughness, the competitive focus, the ultimate victory, becomes a permanent brick in the wall of her growing career legacy. Another story that gets told about why she became one of the all-time greats. As we head into the 2026 season with anticipation building and predictions flying, the tennis world needs to learn the lesson that Belinda Bencic learned the hardest way possible during her bad day at the office in Beijing. Do not tell Coco Gauff to shut up, because she'll respond by turning up the volume on her game. Do not accuse her of playing games, because she'll show you what real championship tennis looks like. And definitely, absolutely, under no circumstances should you make her angry, because when Coco Gauff gets genuinely annoyed and decides she's had enough of your nonsense, she doesn't just beat you in a close competitive match. She doesn't merely survive and advance. She completely erases you from the tournament, leaves you smashing rackets in frustration, and makes you question every decision that led you to that moment while she calmly prepares for her next victim. The next 12 months promise to be absolutely fascinating as we watch whether Gauff can iron out the remaining technical wrinkles in her game, whether Sabalenka can maintain her consistency under increased pressure, and whether any other challengers can emerge to threaten their duopoly at the top of women's tennis. But if you're betting against Coco Gauff at this point, after everything she's shown us about her ability to rise to challenges, to grow from setbacks, to handle pressure with grace, and to win when it matters most, you might want to reconsider that position before you end up with your own instant regret moment. What do you think about this entire situation? Was Bencic completely out of line with her accusations and meltdown, or was there actually some merit to her complaints about the cheering being distracting in an empty stadium? And who do you honestly have taking the crown and dominating women's tennis in 2026? Will it be the power and consistency of Sabalenka, or the athleticism and star power of Gauff? Let us know your thoughts, predictions, and hot takes in the comments section below, because we genuinely want to hear from you and create a conversation about where this sport is heading. And hey, if you enjoyed this deep dive into the drama, the psychology, the business, and the pure entertainment of professional tennis at its most intense, if you appreciated the comprehensive breakdown of what really happened in Beijing and why it matters for the future of the sport, then smash that like button harder than Bencic smashed her racket in frustration. And make absolutely sure you're subscribed to Champions Tennisitics with notifications turned on for all the latest drama, breaking news, insider analysis, and unrivaled coverage that you won't find anywhere else. We'll see you on the next one, where we'll continue bringing you the stories that matter and the perspectives that make you think differently about the beautiful chaos of professional tennis.